are live. Hello. Hey. We have an excellent set for everyone today. Welcome to our Star Trek brunch, and thank you for just the last few minutes. We had Linux Fiend and Lauren Galaxy followed. So, and happy Canadian Thanksgiving, as Todd pointed out in the chat. So, well done, everyone. Yes. Tis a fact.
Yes.
So for those of you who might be joining us for the very first time, this is our Star Trek Sunday brunch. We are going through Deep Space Nine. I have watched it many, many times. Mary has watched most of this. I think you're doing a rewatch right now, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
And Samantha is watching these for the very first time. So much to discuss. This week, the reason we have the wonderful Mary Chieffo with us to join us for brunch is because we are going to be discussing the House of Quark and Grilka, who is one of our favorite characters of all time. So this week we're going to be discussing the 6 episodes of House of Quark, Equilibrium, Second Skin, The Abandoned, Civil Defense, and Meridian. Mary can only stay with us for the first half hour, so we will just do the first 3 with her, and then we will switch over to just Samantha and myself for the last 3. And then next week we will watch the next 6 episodes, which will be Defiant, Fascination, Past Tense, Part 1 and 2, where we're going to have awkward sadness. Bring alcohol. Life support.
Maybe that should be our live watch then.
No, it shouldn't.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
It's too close to home.
I don't know anything.
That's okay. And Heart of Stone. So we'll watch those 6 episodes. But to kick things off, we are going to be talking about the House of Quark. So this is the one where Quark is working in his bar. There's a super drunk Klingon who attacks him because he doesn't want to leave, and then he trips and falls and accidentally stabs himself, and Quark doesn't quite know if he should take credit for it or claim it wasn't the accident that it was, and by claiming that he killed this Klingon in a super badass way to try to get more people to the bar, he embroils himself in some Klingon politics where this guy, the Klingon that died was Kozak, and his wife Grilka shows up and kidnaps Quark to Kronos, where they get married, and whole lot of stuff happens. There's also a subplot here where they've closed the school and Keiko is kind of distraught and trying to find her identity, and there's some very cute O'Brien Keiko stuff that we'll discuss as well. So to kick things off, Mary, would you like to tell us why you like this episode and why you're here today?
Yes. And there's a good chance there's at least one person watching who has heard me talk about this a few times. It's become my go-to panel conversation, because when I was doing my initial watch and looking specifically at Klingon characters and Klingon women, and I remember at the time it was right as we were starting rehearsals in Toronto when I got to this episode. So just getting into everything and just figuring out who Laurel was. I just fell in love with this episode and this character because, first of all, she's a full Klingon. I love so many of the half Klingon women, but to see a fully realized Klingon woman was so exciting. And her entrance alone, just with the hood and everything, and it's funny because I was rewatching it last night. I've rewatched it so many times and I love it every time. Mary Kay Adams, the actor, another Mary, playing a Klingon. She's so terrific. She is able to embody that sexiness and that power, and her juxtaposition with Quark is so fabulous. She has a sense of humor, which I think is so exciting from that first scene on, the way that she threatens him and proves easily that clearly he didn't honorably kill her husband. And just the dynamics of their relationship throughout. One of my favorite lines of hers when she says to put on the cloak or whatever, he's like, why? And she's like, because if you don't, I will kill you. It's just amazing. She's so, and the actor, Mary Kay Adams spoke to, I read a few different articles at one point or another, how liberating it was to play that type of character, that being a Klingon woman was so different from any of the female roles human ones that she had been playing at the time. And I definitely relate to that in getting to breathe life into the Rel. But aside from all that, just the arc of her not being able to succeed her family's house so easily, obviously was a huge inspiration to me, and then ended up being a huge kind of through line for Laurel in many ways. Kind of like I say, like the mic, ooh, yeah. Sorry. The chance was here. But just that journey of rising into her own power, and I like seeing how that we get it in one episode, and then she does come back in searching for Parmach in all the wrong places.
Oh God, I love that episode too. I can't wait.
It's excellent. But just this episode in particular, getting to see that arc is just so fun. And I'm sure we'll talk more, but those are my initial reasons for why I'll always say yes when someone asks me to talk about Grilka.
This was like last minute too, because I had it in my mind. I was like, I think Mary might want to talk about this episode. And then of course, because time means nothing, like 6 days pass and I'm like, oh my God, it's 6 days later. And so we threw this together very last minute. And of course you were fantastically up for it.
Always happy to talk with you both, and always happy to talk about Klingons and Grilka.
Thank you.
Perfect moment.
Awesome. So obviously everyone in the chat is awesome, but I do want to give a special shout out. Mikhail said that they're watching it with a bunch of Star Trek Cruise friends right now, so they're watching us right now. So hi everyone. Okay, so Samantha, this is your first time watching this episode. What were your initial thoughts on this one?
I mean, similarly to Mary, the character arc for her in this one episode was kind of spectacularly done. And the thing that I really connected to was I love continuing to get more well-rounded characters that, represent their species, but they're individuals as well. And I feel like she really exemplified that for me, because the previous episode that we had Mary on, we were talking a lot about the Duras sisters, who are awesome and kick ass, but they're also a little bit one note and they're a little overbearing to me. And I feel like there's a sense here that we get kind of a next phase of that type of Klingon woman. It's like she has a sense of humor, I guess the Duras sisters, they have humor too, but
different kind
maybe.
I feel like Grilka owns her humor, like she's aware of it.
Right, exactly. There's a certain sense of just a more fuller character that I felt from her, and I really responded to how she's trying to make this work. And she was just awesome. And I mean, the whole build up of this episode and her introduction was amazing. And I loved her relationship with Quark and how she obviously like brings him there, and then like 3 minutes later it's like he's got the thing on, he's in a wedding. She's like, this is gonna happen. But then after all that ceremony's done, she kind of opens up to him a little bit about what's been going on, and his ability to help in that situation was one of my favorite parts of the whole episode. But yeah, she was amazing.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because we've joked through all these rewatches, I love me some Klingon politics. And so this is one where we get that moment again, but also seeing the Klingon politics through Quark, I think is very funny and very well pulled off. Dr. Aina in the chat pointed out too, Worf's reactions when he saw Grilka is, she is magnificent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We haven't seen that yet, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was like, did I miss Worf? How was that possible?
No, you're all good. But it's definitely a great moment. Yeah.
It does make me think of too. I feel like it often goes unmentioned when I talk about this episode, but I had noticed because it is also the anniversary. It aired yesterday, however many.
Yeah.
And someone mentioned in the comments like what their favorite moment was, and they were talking about Gowron and all of his reactions, and that it is so funny with the House of Quark. Like, it's so crazy.
The comedy in this episode was spectacular. I mean, little moments like that, and it was
But yeah, and it's like it's and he can't like say it, especially because Quark is like not far off from a Klingon name. He's like House of Quark, Quark, Quark.
It's so delightful, and the performances across the board are just fabulous.
I think my other favorite moment when it comes to the Klingon comedy scene is when Quark is in there trying to explain the financial situation to everyone, and they all have these pads, and they're all like studiously trying to figure it out and getting confused and like zoning out, and Gowron's just like, F this, like whatever.
Yeah. It's totally true. And that makes me think of too, something I really appreciate is the in the Trek thematic realm of illuminating their preconceived ideas and of each other's species. I mean, you have great moments on both sides where she's like, "You're whatever, like a Ferengi," and so it's a really fun. It leans on the humor side, as we've said, but it still goes back to those themes that we see in all the great episodes of "You Think You Know Me" because of my species.
Right, and I actually, sorry, Samantha.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, it led really nicely because I did actually want to mention that for a little bit, because getting a little bit deeper into that, I think it's really fascinating because what we have seen from the Ferengi culture, and I know we'll see more of it, but we've seen some of it where it's very misogynistic. I'll put it that way. And the fact that Quark is like okay helping her and kind of okay with her running her house is a very interesting dichotomy, that it's like when it's not a Ferengi, he's got a different attitude than when it is a Ferengi. It's really interesting the way they set that up.
That's a great point, and it's true. Is it season 2 with the female Ferengi who's in disguise?
Right.
I forget the name of the episode, but I had actually, that was one in my rewatch because I started really watching the latter half because I was watching the Klingon centric, and then I just got super into it. So a lot of the earlier season stuff I hadn't seen before, and so in my rewatch I'm discovering a lot of stuff, which is really great. But that I had not seen that episode, and I think I tweeted like, and I thought I had problems. Like as a Klingon, like, yes, we're a patriarchy, but like we don't have to be naked and never leave the house. Like it's it's just like another level. But yeah, I think that's such an excellent point. And the fact that he was attracted to that Ferengi woman, there is, he is not a typical Ferengi, which is great and why we love him.
Totally. I feel, oh, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was going to say, just continuing on that, like, I felt like this episode really developed Quark's character so much deeper. And it didn't seem, as opposed to some other episodes that we've commented on, I think, Quark has tended to be a conduit for Ferengi individuality in a way, and it sometimes can come off really just kind of off and not right, because he's trying to represent all Ferengi in this one person. But in this episode, like the way he offers to help and the way he tries to help and the way he, at the end when he's in the battle situation, it was all Quark, and it didn't seem forced to me, and it seemed like a really great just developing of his character and who he is, but then also representing like the Ferengi side. So like the Ferengis are the finance people, right, and the money people, and he's using that skill as who he is to help the Klingon side. So I just really liked his the way his character developed in this episode.
Yeah, because we had seen that one in our previous, was it our previous set or the one before that, where he has like that Cardassian ex-girlfriend, and it feels weird. Like they were trying to add depth to his character, but it just didn't quite work. And so him with like this super powerful, angry Ferengi woman or Klingon woman is like, well, that kind of works.
Maybe it works.
I also love the Klingon Trial. So you mentioned the battle scene where Quark he's got the batleth and then just kind of like chucks it and drops to his knees, and all the Klingons are like,
I love that moment. They're literally like, what? Like, what do we do now? Like,
yeah. And
this is unusual.
It gives depth to Gowron as well. Like it's like everyone is in line with who their characters have been established to be, but is developed from that, which is very exciting. That we can predict, like with Gowron specifically, you're like, okay, I know this guy. Like, I'm not sure how he's going to react. Like, that's kind of the fun of the storytelling, is you're not exactly sure how this will resolve, because it's not like, oh, well, he always, which is very, very fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
Another, in the Quark arc, the Quark arc, another thing I noted is that, you know, the kind of the buttons, the kind of cold open in the tag is about him, like, obviously, as usual, wanting to keep business up at the bar. And I find it interesting you pointing out that the arc really is he does something more selfless in many ways throughout the episode. And it is lovely that that's kind of the moral in many ways. He can still tell that story to his brother for fun. But that struck me as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, there's still certain selfishness to it, to why he's doing what he's doing, but it's also selfless in a way. So it's like growth, personal growth, Quark.
Ferengi growth. It's right. Oh, this one of my favorite, the line, because with his leg on her thigh, that whole every time, because you're like, not the way they shot it too. You're like, you don't like. I thought that was a very successful just angle of like, what's going? Is this? And then it's like, nope. Okay.
I think, I mentioned in the chat when we did the live watch, like, that's me at a bar, like, sir, you will remove your hand or I will break you.
And he's like, cool. Like,
good, got it.
Thank you so much.
Called out. Yeah, and we get to see culturally the Klingons with the both this sort of like the clinical wedding, you know, and then the clinical divorce of like, just, okay, we've done it. That's the legal thing. All right, now moving on. And I feel like that the Klingon culture manages to embody both of those things. For spoiler reasons, we won't go into details of the romantic wedding type stuff, but but to see the very like, we need an heir, we need a house, we need, you know, all right. Done.
Yeah.
Culture-wise, too, the one thing I always like to point out, my post-praxis explosion, I always like to bring up that what T'Kuvma predicted in Discovery, more or less, it continues to be true, which is that there is a certain homogenization that has happened. Universal homogenization. I said it once with a Klingon accent. Universal homogenization and assimilation. There we go.
Yeah.
And we see that with Kozak as her husband, and we see this a lot in this era of Klingons, is they still have the power and reaching towards honor, as we talked about last time. But you do see that a lot of them, you know, have been diminished in certain ways, perhaps culturally. And I think that, you know, it's not something that's overly focused on during these episodes, but it is there, and I appreciate that it's a little tragic, you know, like, and we see this a lot with strong, beautiful cultures, is like, if a larger force comes in and you know, it doesn't overtly suppress, but shifts the way they're able to express themselves, often it can result in just a diminishment of the culture. So that's something that I took note of when I was doing my first watch of all the Klingon stuff, especially knowing that, again, we were looking at way before this point in time.
Right. But, and seeing Kozak too kind of struggle through that, of that he's, you know, corrupted and like using the system, and of course he is wasted in Deep Space Nine, you know, he's there drinking himself beyond comprehension. So it is interesting to see that, for sure. Yeah. We could probably talk about this for the whole hour, but
I'm like,
it's okay. It's good. It's very cool. But we should go on, because I definitely want to talk about Second Skin while Mary's here and not waste your whole time. So let's, well, Andy just redeemed a stretch break, so we're going to stretch while I describe this episode. So the next episode is Equilibrium. which is where Dax starts to get this hallucination musical tune in her mind, and they realize that she starts having these like horrible, freaky visions, and starts to break down. She goes into shock, and then they realize that there was this Trill that was Joran Balar and had carried the symbiont for a while, and then they had tried to suppress it, and we get into this whole political intrigue thing with Trill culture that it gets actually to a pretty dark place. So I think I'd like to hand it over to Samantha, especially because you've been learning about this Trill culture in real time, and I think it's been interesting to watch your attitude about the Trills evolve through this.
Yeah,
watch.
exactly. I mean, I feel like I finally sort of understand how it works now, and this episode was really I liked seeing the habitat of the symbiont creatures. Like that was really cool to see. Oh, okay, this is like where they are born, and then the Trill culture is, you know, obviously them combining with the host. So that was really cool. But yeah, the decision that was made to say like there's only a certain amount of certain type of person that can be joined, because if everyone was joined, or like I actually forget why they couldn't join everybody.
It was because they only have a set amount of symbionts, right. And so the fact that like way more people could be hosts, they don't want to incite that level of like competition, and so they put into the culture that only a select few are even qualified to do this. So, which is crazy.
Yeah, that level of control that they're able to exert, and the funny thing is they're trying to avoid a certain like free market sort of society, like because people could essentially, you know, find ways to take advantage of the fact that there's fewer available, but they're also kind of doing the same thing in making that not available. So I mean, that was really, really interesting, and I liked the idea that, you know, for Dax, you know, this person that had been joined, it didn't work like that. Yeah. So it was kind of a neat sense of another layer of the Trill relationship is that sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't stick.
Yeah.
What about you, Mary? What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Samantha was saying. It's and like you said, it's just like a darker view into that culture, which I am very fascinated by. And there's like the fun side. I always joke like I would, you know, love to be a Trill in many ways, because it totally caters to my actor sensibilities of like, oh, I've had all these different lives and stuff like that. So that's the fun side, but then it's really exploring, well, what does that mean? And these are living entities with energy, you know, and they can communicate, and really exploring that thematically, past trauma, and how we, you know, I think metaphorically looking at the human experience, how if there's an aspect of your existence that you have suppressed, or you don't want to look at, you know, I think, I mean, obviously Dax and Trills in general, but certainly Dax has been such a iconic character in so many ways to so many different types of people. That was something that I was really thinking about. It was like so many different communities have been able to identify with that character. And what a gift. And I know Terry spoke to that recently, I think on Star Trek Day too, of how honored she was to have that. I also love Terry. I love Dax and Terry. I always Terry Kitty whenever I see her. I'm like, hi, how are you? And she's very sweet about it. Bless her. But that's a side note. But it was great to see that theme explored through her character. I like, you know, again, the larger political stuff I think is obviously very relevant, and you know, they didn't write that on accident. But when it comes to a personal experience and how we have to, you know, I think it's a very beautiful moment at the end when she goes in the pool and says like, you were part of me, and like, that I think we can all relate to in different moments in our lives. You know, some of us more traumatic than others, but anything that we don't want to accept about ourselves, something we either did or had done to us. So that was what really struck me on a larger level with that. And then superficially, I also love Dax's hair and clothes.
You're allowed. It's okay. Her hair is fabulous in this episode. Right. Yeah, there's a couple really good points in the chat talking about like this idea of like black market symbionts, you know, this idea that we could really the capitalist side could come out and get very ugly very fast. But I think, you know, to your point of that scene at the end, I think what that resonates with a lot of people, particularly some of us with anxiety who tend to replay parts over in our mind and beat ourselves up if, you know, over stuff, get in that bad headspace. Accepting that and moving on is what we have to do. And so it's very, I don't know, kind of freeing to watch someone do that in real time. And I think she does a great job. Before we move on to the next episode, though, I do want to mention, one of the things that I love about Deep Space Nine we saw in this episode as well. And that was the cold open of them just having a dinner party at Cisco's house. And I think or at Cisco's, you know, quarters. And I think that's what Deep Space Nine has done so successfully, is really make this like a community family type show where you see, and I think Samantha, you pointed out in your comments about like Bashir just complaining about having beets.
Yeah, Bashir hates beets, and I felt so seen because I hate beets too, and everyone seems to love them. So when Bashir was like, doesn't like beets, I was like, yay.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's that familial sense and the playfulness, and talking about the humor. Like obviously this is a darker episode in many ways, but you get a certain lightness in certain moments, and that sense of community. Also, the Guardian Trill being so like eccentric and quirky was really fun because you know, when you experience Dax and then just a lot of the Trills that we get introduced to have a certain regality to them. So fun to see this guy being like, oh, hello, you know, I'm a cool quirky. Like, and yet there's still like a kind of uneasy quality to that. I thought that was a fun layer. And also I just imagine that actor like getting that script, or like sometimes I just think about like, what was the direction? Like, what did they say? Like, I think if we just make him a little bit like
right.
Just a little bit weirder. Yeah. Just a little bit weirder.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, as Muhammad pointed out in the chat, you've been living in a cave for a very long time.
He's like, got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. That's awesome. So before we let you go, we got to talk about Second Skin, because I think this usually tops lists for best Deep Space Nine episodes, and watching it again, it's no question why. I think it's a fabulous, fabulous episode. For those of you who may not remember, this is the one where Kira basically gets contacted by a Bajoran archivist who's like, so you were in this prison, and she's like, no, I wasn't. And they're like, all right, well, you should come and we'll sort this out. And then she disappears and wakes up as a Cardassian in a very creepy, upsetting, very gaslighty, torture-y sort of way. And so like she's got this whole Obsidian Order basically convincing her, trying to get her to hand over secrets. And they're like, you were been a sleeper agent. We erased your memory for this exact reason. So you would be a perfect sleeper agent. And then she's got this like father figure she's supposed to be his daughter, but doesn't remember any of that. And he's just thrilled to have his daughter back, you know, to kind of just let you know what happens. It's okay. She's not actually a Cardassian. but they do a great job convincing us. And I think, Samantha, you even texted me when you finished it and you were like, oh my God.
I texted, I'm so glad Kira's not a Cardassian, but I literally thought she was for 50 minutes.
Yeah, totally.
It was so convincing. And I mean, it's Star Trek, like it could be true. Like that was really upsetting. But her acting was amazing. And this whole episode just really, really interesting to watch and get into that mindset. And that brings to mind like that there are some sleeper agents out there that are being brought back, and I don't know if we'll come back to that, but that's it in itself is a scary thought.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Mary? What's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm gonna make a silly sleeper agent joke. Don't do it, guys. It doesn't work out.
Oh, right. Yes. Tell us about that.
Not a great. I was the whole episode. I was like, oh no.
This is a little close to home.
Yeah. But outside of that, I agree. It's a really terrific episode. I think, the way exactly being like, I know she's a Bajoran. Like, I know this, and yet you still going through it. You totally get caught up in it. It's clear that something's up, but that's what's exciting is like, is something up that they're gaslighting her, or is that that truly this is something that she has forgotten and can't be awakened from. Just to add to it, Garrett is just a fantastic character. Like, it's just every time he pops up, and I think I've said this before, but it's such a testament to the actor in just always being present and always just doing his thing. And then of course they give him lots of really fun, interesting things to do in unexpected ways. So always appreciate that. And then Gamor, right, is the father, and his performance is beautiful. And I was so deeply, genuinely moved by their scene at the end. I was laying at my bed like
it's really good. Yeah.
It's really good, and thematically, once again, such a Trek theme of, seeing the humanity in your enemy. And they did it beautifully. And then we already said Na is amazing, but to do all of that with different prosthetics, like, I can't imagine how. I feel like I've heard her speak to that a bit. I mean, because that's like, it's just a lot, and particularly knowing your hearing gets affected, anything around the ears. So that's like the biggest shift. Like, even having any prosthetic on the face, but when that is just like a different experience. So the fact that she was able to, I didn't feel like I was seeing the actor being bombarded by new prosthetics. So that's a huge. Kudos to her for that, because it's any shift in that way is very intense. So those are my main thoughts, other than, I mean, I think it's funny. I wasn't writing too much or thinking too much about what I was responding to, because I was just so engaged in it. But I enjoy it, and fun for her to figure out what, wait a minute, no, this is the,
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think what they did so successfully in this episode was really, I mean, and we're talking about this from the House of Quark as well, is taking these, we've sort of been bombarded a little bit with like evil Cardassians the whole way. And so now we're given, between Garrett, Gamor, and then the, Elena, no, is it, no, not Elenis. I don't have his name down. The other Obsidian Order guy, and to see all of them. And I think it was so smart of them, where it was like, we got Garrick's sort of hero moment, and we got to see him a little bit more as a tragic character, where he's talking about, the jealousy of being able to leave the station and then coming back to Cardassia and all of that. Then we see the, bad Obsidian Order torture gaslighty dude. And then but the fact then that the dad, that he's on their side, and he, and this is why they were using him to get this information. But then to put that great twist then at the end is that now once we have this frame, and as he's leaving, he's like, one piece of life advice: do not trust Garrick. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
But we love him.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But I agree, because that was intense. That was not like a look out for Garrick, all right, bye. It was like front and center. Listen to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't trust this guy. I agree. That was like, okay.
Yeah. And speaking of him being super present, I don't know if people are aware. Yeah, Jimmer Roy said in the chat, is Garrett good or bad? Yes. That's the answer. But if people aren't aware of this, there is a book that the actor Andy Robinson wrote that is a Star Trek novel called A Stitch in Time that is all about Garrick, but it's partially developed from the notes that Andy was taking while they were filming Deep Space Nine as filling in what Garrick was doing, what he was up to, what his motivations were in every single episode, even when we weren't seeing him. And I think that level of dedication comes across in that character so well that's why we love him.
Totally.
Yeah, you totally believe exactly that his life continues whether we're seeing him or not. It's a very, and that's part of where the humor comes from as well. Like, just that you just believe it. It's
Yeah, he's got nothing left to lose. All right, Mary. Well, we've kept you longer than we intended. Did you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I think that's it. It's always a delight to chat with both of you, and I'm always thrilled. But this I'm so grateful because obviously, as I've said a million times, love Girl Scout, love that episode. But to watch these two and to watch them all three in order was really great. And I mentioned this before we went live, just that they were illuminating the women. Like, to have 3 episodes in a row, it's one thing for every once in a while we get a flavor, but it's like each one had a very specific spotlight on a female character, and multiple, because the other women surrounding the one who was being focused on still had autonomy and things to do. So I appreciated that, and I think for the the time, and I know all the women involved have spoken to that they were doing their utmost to push the boundaries in that way. And that's not an easy feat when you have a lot of different voices from up above being like, "Whoa, what is this women? I don't know." So just shout out to the fact that they got as much as they did out there, and credit to also all of the actors, the women who just gave terrific performances. And I think I said this on a panel with Nana, how like people respond so much to the character because of the energy and what she brought, and I believe Terry brought, and Mary Kay Mary Kay Adams. I always want to say Mary Kay Place. That's enough. But when you bring that extra zhuzh, which is actually a word spelled very differently than I thought. I found this out recently.
I did too.
I was like, what? Side note. But I really celebrate that, and again, just as we continue to move forward in this world, I have such a respect for everyone who came before, and we're pushing those boundaries. So I guess that's my...
Yeah, no, thanks. And I mean, just quickly too, I do think if people aren't aware, because I know Nana's mentioned this on panels and stuff, and I think it was a panel I did with her for Dragon Con, where we were talking about, she said very clearly that doing Kira was rough. It was hard for her, and the idea of going back to revisit that character is very hard, but she respects, it's like she's proud of her performance, but at the same time it was a very traumatizing, intense thing for her to go through. And I think episodes like Second Skin are very indicative of why, because she puts her heart and soul into it, as do all the women in the show. But so anyway, well, thank you again. We'll have you back. I mean, we will invite you're always welcome, but not all Klingon episodes. We're not going to one note you, Mary.
Yeah, no, that's what was so great. We got a whole different, but still in line with my General Mary Chieffo women. Yay! Star Trek. But yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'll let you guys.
Thank you.
Watching, and thanks everyone who has tuned in. And I'm just gonna leave now. I just click out, and then I just
click out. You're free to go. All right.
Bye, Mary.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, so Samantha, it's you and me. We'll finish out these last episodes. We've only got about 20 minutes, but I think we should be good for this one. So the next episodes that we've got, Abandoned, which, to be frank, I have seen this episode probably 5 or 6 times, and I always forget that it's a Jem'Hadar kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, always. Every time I'm like, Oh yeah, it's a Jem'Hadar. Anyway, so this is the Abandoned is the episode where basically Quark buys this salvage from the Gamma Quadrant, pays for it, ends up being an abandoned child in it, which leads to a very hilarious dressing down from Sisko of like, you should check stuff before you buy it. And this is kind of, I mean, we've seen this in other sci-fi stories. It's like the baby's kind of weird and super accelerated growth, and we find out that there's a Jem'Hadar kid, and it's also this indication that they're genetically engineered, that they have this chemical dependency to keep them in line. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this one, Samantha, because we're getting into more about the Dominion and the Gamma Quadrant and stuff.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway for me from this episode was how the Jem'Hadar grow their children, and that they are genetically engineered soldiers essentially, and that was terrifying. I think there was some interesting Odo character development in this episode, in that he kind of takes on this kid as kind of a project, and I think he feels somewhat either guilty or just protective, given that he looks like one of the founders, and so that's why this kid is responding to him. So that was interesting to get a little bit of that starting to come up again for Odo. Odo has the creepiest smile I've ever seen.
This is when he's trying to teach the kid to smile, and he's like,
but it's like he doesn't have lips, so it's just horrifying.
Well, I think it's horrifying when he's trying to do it. It's adorable because even earlier in the episode, this is when Kira comes by his quarters, because he got quarters for the first time.
Oh yeah.
And she sees all of this stuff here that he's like practicing his shapeshifting, and he's got that, and she's like, so what happened to the bucket? And he's like, oh, I'm keeping it. And then he puts the plant in there, and he's like, yeah. And that's adorable.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But fair.
But I think,
creepy smile.
Creepy smile. Other than his relationship with the kid, really, and the fact that we learn how the Jem'Hadar are created, I didn't take away a whole lot else from this episode. But yeah, what did you think?
I mean, I really like seeing Kira and Odo's relationship grow, that she comes to check on him. She's the only one that he initially lets into his quarters, to show her around. And, so it's nice to see just their true, genuine friendship develop. And then, like you said, his feeling of responsibility for this kid, for, when he's still grappling himself with his identity and his homeworld and everything and what this means, realizing that he's this founder of the Dominion, but then his true sort of instincts are to stay with Deep Space Nine, not go with them, but then still explore that part of his side of his life now that he knows. So I think that that's pretty good. The other, part of the storyline, which I find super weird, is Jake's girlfriend.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I'm not being I have no problem with a good, spring-autumn relationship. But it's extreme in this. And he's 16. And it feels not right.
That was really odd. Yeah, I was like, why did they have to do, I mean, I don't know.
I don't mind, I think for Jake, it was an interesting setup from a character development that she's the Dabo girl and Dabo woman, let's be perfectly honest. But they seem to have a genuine affection for each other. And I think it would have worked if they had just, he's friends with a Dabo girl and wants to invite her over for dinner. And then you find out that he's developed a friendship with her where she's learning about his writing and the fact that they can use those familial expectations that we've touched on a little bit with Jake, where he's trying to lay the groundwork to his dad that he might not want to go into Starfleet. and her telling the story about like how her family rejected her for becoming a Dabo girl. You know, so they're trying to lay in those parallels, but I think it's just so jarring that he's 16 with her. And yeah, no, I think they explicitly say I think at some point, now I'm starting to question it, but I feel like Cisco explicitly said like, oh, Jake, but you're only 16. I could be wrong. I could just be in my head, but anyway.
Yeah. I think, you know, at first when Cisco's talking to O'Brien about like, I'm having her over because I don't want her with my son or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then she actually comes over and I was like, oh yeah, at first I was like, Cisco, you're being like bad dad, dude. Like, but then I kind of was, oh, I get it. I get why he kind of wants to discourage this. But yeah, that was just kind of.
O'Brien's reaction was great though, where he was like, well done, Jake.
Yes. I love O'Brien and Jake together. They're so cool.
So great. So cute. So the next, so yeah, I mean, overall, this was a good sort of interesting way of introducing more about the Jem'Hadar, giving us a good reason to learn more about them and then have some character development for Odo as well. Mm-hmm. The next episode, I think it's a great episode. But it is very much a bottle episode. There's not a lot of specific development in this one. This is civil defense, where they're basically trying to fix the station and they trip a security program. And so we got O'Brien and Cisco, and then Garrett, being a Cardassian, is free to wander through the station, is basically put in lockdown. We get Gul Dukat involved as well. And for me, I think, you know, it's a high stakes, decent action type episode. I think it keeps you engaged and yeah, it's just fun. So yeah, this is definitely up there, but I'd say in the broader scheme of all of these like really intense character development episodes, I mean, just thinking about it, we've had an intense Quark character development, Jadzia character development, now then Kira, then Odo. And so it's like, this is just, all right, let's just chill.
Yeah, exactly. It was the fun sort of, you know, you're right, bottleneck and just, you know, fun to see them working together. And Jake with his dad and O'Brien was fun, like that whole, situation. And then Gul Dukat he's on the recording, but then he comes to the station, right?
Yeah, he actually comes.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I like seeing him because I'm trying to figure him out. I don't have any conclusions after this episode, really. Yeah. But I do like when he shows up.
Good. I think it looks like people in the chat would agree with you. Laura H said it's one of my favorite episodes. Dukat versus Kira, Dukat versus Garrett, and Dukat versus Hubris. Yeah, that's fair. And definitely backfires on him for sure.
Yes. Oh, that's right. He puts in his thing, and so then he's like, "Oh crap."
Whoops.
But it's like, yeah, that was fun.
It is interesting though, because I feel like it does as sort of standalone as this episode is, it does give us really good insight to how militaristic Dukat was with the station and how genuinely threatened he was by Bajoran uprising, where it was like, this could happen and I will burn it to the ground before I give up the station to the Bajorans. So
exactly. Yeah. That's kind of scary.
Intense. Yeah, pretty intense in that one for sure. Yeah, attention Bajoran workers. It's and yeah, Astro, it's disconcerting the station they live on still has a lot of booby traps.
Right. I was thinking that. I was like, how could O'Brien not have found some kind of this big of a trigger, like in the beginning, like when he's trying to put this station together, like, I would guess it was just very well hidden. But O'Brien seems to know like the subroutines of the subroutines of the adjacent routines to the subroutines. So like the fact that he can find something this big is just, it's interesting.
Pretty impressive. It was buried in there. Dukat knows what's what.
Yes.
Yeah. So good times. All right. Last episode to discuss, Meridian. I have thoughts on this episode.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this episode.
So the summary of this one, this is the one where they're in the Gamma Quadrant at the Defiant. Now we have the Defiant. And a planet just materializes in front of them. They invite them over. It's called Meridian, and they basically spend all their time in another phase of existence. And they have consciousness throughout this, but no physical being. And then on a regular basis, the planet comes back for a short period of time. So it's like it appears for 12 days and then disappears for 60 years. And every time it has less time in the universe and will eventually stop appearing. There's also a subplot, which I feel, it's the subplot's really the one I have the most thoughts about, but this is our first appearance of many of our good friend Jeffrey Combs as Tehran, the creepiest expletive that as I think been in any Star Trek episode, and he's nothing but creepy in this. I think I put in my notes, and we'll get into it. Jeffrey Combs does, which is the reason I love him, he does delightfully creepy very well. But Tehran is just creepy. There was no delightful radar. In this. No, every self-preservation radar I have goes up throughout this entire episode. So this is the one, for people who might not remember, this is the one where he basically tries to pay Quark a lot of money to get a holodeck version of Kira. For reasons. Yeah.
He was so, coolly, calmly insistent about it that I kept thinking, am I missing something? Why? Because he's so, quiet and psychopathic about it. I must have Kira. And I was like, what? Is he really asking what I think he's asking? And yeah, but you're right. There was no delightful creepy about this. It was just plain creepy. And Quark, I like that he was sort of, you can tell for a second, he's going back and forth. Should I not? Of course I should. It's money.
Yeah.
But
as he got into it, he realized that it's creepy. And
creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oof.
So before we we'll come back to it, but we'll talk about the initial plot first. So this is Dax falls in love with someone on this planet, and I think we all have a hard time where they try to make these they've done this before with these life-changing, instant met in a single episode romances, and this one isn't as bad as some of the ones that we've seen, but I think it's still just really hard to pull off.
Yeah, I think this actually is one of the worst I've seen in terms of chemistry and the way the writing was and the way the actors were choosing to show this buildup was just so off. He has a creepiness to him. And at first I thought he was going to be one of those characters where maybe he's just some kind of his role in this society of 30 people is to be every 60 years he's the one who tries to grab the stranger and procreate. I was literally thinking that's what his motivation was, because Zia was at first when they're at the dinner table, he's I'm admiring your spots. And she was just eating and not responding and trying to have a conversation about the science and trying to be let's talk about your planet and how unique it is and whatever. And he's just clearly just trying to flirt with her. Yeah. But then she wanted that, then she had the feelings for him. And I was how did those happen? I don't get your attraction here at all. There's nothing going on that makes sense.
Right. Well, she reciprocated in a way that's consistent for the way Jadzia has, in a fun way, flirted with people. And we've pointed out before, there's some element of her being this Dax symbiont that she's lived for hundreds of years, and she, doesn't take that sort of thing super seriously. But then the fact that it pivoted to her throwing her life away, and you're just what?
Yeah. It didn't make any sense to me. It was Yeah, and the thing is, it would have made more sense if they'd had better chemistry, I think, or made different choices of how they were delivering these lines. Like there was something so clunky about that I was completely taken out of the fact that Jadzia actually was attracted to this person,
Right.
and would have made that decision to go to the planet, which was super drastic.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know.
Because this episode reminds me of my favorite #1 Star Trek episode of all time, which is Voyager's Counterpoint, in the sense that we saw in that one Janeway and, you know, the bad guy that's double timing them, but she gets very excited about solving this problem, and her sleeves are rolled up, and she's like, and you get to see her in science mode, and I feel like we got that with Jadzia. And but the thing was, in Counterpoint, like, they had very good chemistry, and
Exactly.
they had more of a high stakes relationship where you didn't know where the trust factor lied, that at least you were kind of invested in that tension as well. And this one they did miss the ball on this one for sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah, absolutely. You're so right. That's like very good comparison, is that she's in that science mode, but there's still a little bit of this fun sexual tension going on that makes sense. And in this one, it just sort of completely missed the mark for me. And yeah, someone said, I think A. Harvey, yeah, he was just dull.
yeah,
There wasn't
just boring.
completely boring. But the thing that was also funny was that everyone on the shuttle, you know, was okay with her, like not insisting that she think about this.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
which I thought was unusual.
And they legitimately throw in emotional goodbyes. You know, they very much lean into that. The significant portion of the episode is them saying goodbye to Jadzia and accepting that they're not going to see her again. And I don't know. It's bizarre. It's a weird one. But going back to the Quark thing. The thing I like about this is that, and we started to get into it, but Quark is like kind of, he toes that line of good and bad in this episode, where particularly I think it's funny when he's accepted the money before he starts to have that moral conscience creep in, and he tries to keep tricking Kira to be able to hollow image her, and then
My 1 millionth customer.
yeah, he does the 1 millionth customer thing. And then at one point, too, she's up on the promenade and Quark is like looking at her through a holo camera. And they look directly at him. And Odo's like, I think Quark is trying to take a picture of you with a holo. And he's like, he's like not even registering that they're coming right for him.
Yeah.
And it's very funny. The comedy is very good. If you don't read into it too much there. There's also a great moment when they confront him with the holo camera, and basically Quark says, "Oh, I'm putting together like a combat war scenario so people can fight alongside the great Kira Nerys," and Odo's response is, "Naked, I assume."
That was brilliant.
Odo has
So
zero
good.
chill with what Quark does with the holo suites. It's so funny.
Odo's just like, why you lying?
Yeah. And then, of course, the great where, you know, the fact that they even, you know, it can't be what it is when they actually show him go into the holo program, and you're like, oh my God, there's no way I can watch this. And then it ends up being Quark. Where he's like, I've been waiting for you.
Oh.
It's just, shut it down, brain bleach the crap out of it. It's so good.
So good.
It's so good.
So good.
Yeah. In fact, I put that picture in our notes as well.
Thanks for that this morning. That was fantastic.
You're welcome. You're just lucky I didn't get the whole gif of panning up the legs to his popping out. I've been waiting for you. But yeah, I mean, this episode just has multiple avenues for creep factor, so it's not great. But thankfully, we get to see Jeffrey Combs come back as other less horrible characters that are delightful, and we love him.
Oh, phew.
Oh, because this is definitely the worst one. All right, so unfortunately, I think this week I probably won't have time for a joint watch party that we'll do. But we are going to be watching and discussing next week Past Tense. So for better or worse, you are welcome to join the discussion. I am aware that it is very heavy, very politically driven, very relevant to things going on in our time. But I am looking forward to our discussion and particularly hearing Samantha's thoughts on this. But Samantha, I will warn you, have a drink while you're watching Past Tense. just
Okay.
Gonna let you know. All right, and let me put in, let's see, so any final thoughts, Samantha?
I think so. That was such a fun discussion.
Good. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And so next week we're going to be talking about Defiant, Fascination, Past Tense Part 1 and 2, Life Support, and Heart of Stone. So join us back here next Sunday at 11 o'clock Pacific time. And thanks again to Mary the Chief for hanging out. And thank you to Sadapi for subscribing again. And all right, so on that, we will say farewell. Take care of yourselves, everyone. And we will catch you all next time. All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.